The first thing anyone ever noticed about Relmer Heath was the color of the sky. It was wrong. Not always, and not for everyone, but sometimes in that long stretch between sunset and full dark, the sky turned aubergine. Not purple, not violet, but deep aubergine, the way eggplants look in candlelight or bruises do under bathwater. Locals knew to stay indoors when that hue settled in. There were no sirens, no curfews, just a quiet closing of doors, the flick of porch lamps, and the way even the dogs refused to bark. Sienna Calhoun didn't know any of this when she arrived. She stepped off the last bus, her boots crunching into gravel, luggage in one hand and a thermos in the other, half full of cold black tea. The driver didn't say goodbye, just looked at her in the mirror like he wanted to, then changed his mind and pulled away before she could ask which path led to the village proper. There was no reception, no gas station, no inn, just a crooked sign. Welcome to Relmer, EST 1683, where things stay found. She stared at that slogan a moment. Something about it made her skin feel too tight. Then she adjusted her scarf and started walking. It took 15 minutes to reach the heart of the village. The cobbled streets were ancient and wet with mist, twisting like someone had tried to draw them in the dark. Houses leaned against each other in shivering rows, their windows glowing faintly amber behind curtains of lace or wax paper. There was no sound, no birds, no engines, not even a breeze. Just a soft, persistent ticking of a clock tower at the far end of town. It wasn't beautiful. Not quite, but it was comfortable. That was the word, and that was the problem. Sienna had come here to be alone, not to be comforted. After everything, the hospital, the months of muttering relatives and cautious smiles, the smell of antiseptic that clung to her hair. She wanted the world to be as empty as she felt. But Relmer wasn't empty. It was watching. The woman she was renting from, Mrs. Merrow, greeted her at the gate of the cottage. "I keep the key under the stone sheep," she said without preamble. "You'll hear the chimes. Don't open the attic door." Sienna blinked. What attic? Mrs. Merrow only smiled, her teeth like rows of shelf coins. "You'll know when you see it." She left without shaking hands. The cottage was modest, barely 2 rooms and a loft, but it was dry and smelled of rosemary and mothballs. There was a single oil painting above the hearth, an expanse of heather and bloom beneath a thunderstorm, a figure barely visible in the distance, face turned away. Whoever painted it had left the sky unfinished. No aubergine, just white space, raw canvas where clouds should have been. That night, Sienna didn't unpack. She heated the rest of her tea, sat by the window, and stared out at the stillness. No wind, no insects. Even the mist held its breath. And when the sun dropped behind the moor and the color of the sky began to shift, from blue to gold, from gold to ash, she saw it, a shimmer, not in the sky, but in the trees at the edge of the heath, as if something moved, slow and heavy, through the bracken, something that did not disturb the grass or break the branches, but left a ripple in the air, like heat, like breath. The clock tower struck 8, but it did so 12 times, and then a second chime from beneath the floorboards. Sienna didn't move at first. The second chime hadn't come from outside. It hadn't echoed like the tolling of the old tower bell. It had been close, low. The sound of a hollow vessel struck from within, like someone tapping a clay bowl with the side of their thumb. She stayed by the window, hands wrapped around the teacup, her breath shallow. Mist clung to glass outside like wet silk. The shimmer near the trees had vanished, if it had ever been there at all. But the second chime remained in her bones. She stood, reluctantly, and crossed the uneven floor. Each board gave a polite creak beneath her feet. There was nothing overtly wrong. No blood, no shattered windows, no flickering bulbs. But something unseen had settled into the house. Not inside the walls, but just below them, as though the house had a second skin, one stitched into the earth, and it had just taken a breath. She set her cup down and crouched beside the fireplace. The floor there was slightly raised, the only area where the boards curved in a deliberate shape, a circle roughly 4 feet wide. The rest of the room had straight lines, tight angles. This patch didn't. Sienna ran her fingers along the edge. No nails, no hinge, no handle, but there was a seam. She stood quickly and turned on the radio that sat atop the mantel, hoping for news or weather or even the comforting monotony of static. But it clicked once and died, silent and cold. The clock tower outside rang again. 9 times. No, 8. And then one more. Always one more. She backed away from the circle and went upstairs into the loft. The bed was old, but the mattress was thick and soft, covered in a quilt patterned with faded wildflowers. Sienna wrapped herself in it and watched the ceiling, which was sloped, exposed beams like ribs above her. Sleep didn't come easily, but sometime after the wind returned, after the mist receded into the trees and the aubergine sky faded to its proper black, her eyelids drifted shut. That was when she heard it. A voice not loud, not angry. Male, ancient, coming from under the bed. Do not lift the bell, child. It keeps the hush. She sat up, heart hammering, and threw back the quilt. There was no one there. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. Morning came slow and pale. Fog clung low to the ground outside, and the heath beyond the trees looked bruised. The chiming had stopped, but the memory of it lingered, a tickle at the base of her skull. Sienna made tea and sat again by the window. Mrs. Merrow hadn't said when she'd be by next. There were no clocks in the house, none that worked, anyway. Only the faint impression of gears, the ghost of winding keys, the aftertaste of time. She noticed something new, too. The painting above the hearth, it had changed. The sky was no longer blank. Where once the canvas had been unfinished, there now bloomed a smear of deep aubergine, and the figure in the distance, it had turned around. No face, just a smooth blur where the features should be. Sienna stood and crossed the painting. She ran her fingers across the canvas. Dry, acrylic, but not quite, and there was a smell, faint but unmistakable, that curled into her nostrils and made her stomach flip. Old water, something steeped too long. She backed away. Then, without meaning to, her gaze dropped to the floor again. That damn circle. It was warmer than the rest of the house now, the boards above it darker, as though something beneath had begun to seep upward. That's when she noticed the scratches. 3 faint lines in the wood, like the marks of someone trying to pry it open from below, or keep something inside. And beneath them, nearly invisible, a word, carved in looping script. Hush! The sky was the color of milk and tarnished coins by the time Sienna ventured outside. A narrow path cut between the heath and the village, lined with stones and moss-thick fences that leaned as though bowing some ancient weight. Her boots crunched softly on the gravel, the air cold enough to bite, but too still to carry breath. No birds, no dogs, no insects, just the wind whispering like a memory forgotten mid-sentence. She needed answers, or at least a place that didn't smell like dried herbs and old warnings. The only store in Relmer was a small place tucked between a post office and a crumbling chapel. Whitlow's General, according to peeling letters above the door. Inside it was dim and hushed, lit by oil lamps and a single window painted with frost. A bell rang above the door when she entered, and a man appeared from the back. He was tall, thin and bird-like, with jaw too narrow and eyes too round. He wore suspenders over a white shirt and smelled faintly of clothes and mildew. His name tag read Marlin. "Morning," he said, though his voice made it sound like morning. "You're the one in Mrs. Merrow's place." Sienna nodded, brushing mist from her coat. "Yeah, I got in last night." Marlin didn't smile. He just picked up a glass jar from the shelf and began dusting it with a rag that looked older than the store. "You shouldn't be out." Sienna blinked. "Excuse me." "The sky has been bruising early," he said, as if that explained everything. "Stay in. Light your lamps. Don't listen to the knocks." Sienna opened her mouth to ask what he meant, but he turned away. She bought tea and matches. No bread, no milk, just tea and matches. It felt like all she could justify in that place. As she left, Marlin called after her. "If you hear the lullaby, shut your eyes. Don't matter if it's your mother's voice. Just shut, Em." She didn't look back. The walk home was longer than she remembered. The fences on either side of the path were unfamiliar now, made of smooth, black were where before they had been mossy stone. The trees leaned closer, branches bare and brittle, like the hands of widows peeking through lace curtains. At the edge of the heath, the air grew warmer, and the sky began to darken. Too early. It wasn't even afternoon. She quickened her pace, eyes on the twisted chimneys of the village. She'd nearly reached her cottage when she saw someone standing at the garden gate. An old woman, but not Mrs. Merrow. This one was taller, her frame wrapped in a long shawl of blue and gray, her fingers black with what looked like soot. She didn't speak as Sienna approached, just nodded once, slowly, like she'd been waiting a long, long time. "Can I help you?" Sienna asked, keeping her voice polite, careful. The woman didn't answer. Her face was soft and expressionless, the kind that could have once been lovely, but it sagged gently under the weight of too many quiet years. Her eyes were gray and slightly luminous, as though reflecting something Sienna couldn't see. And then she opened her mouth. Sienna took a step back. There was no tongue, just a bell, a small bronze bell nestled behind her teeth, swinging faintly without sound. The old woman turned and walked away, her feet not quite touching the ground. Inside, the cottage was cold. Sienna set the kettle on the stove and lit a match with shaking hands. The clock on the mantel hadn't moved. Still no ticking. Still no time. She looked at the floor again. The circle of wood had changed color. Darker now. Almost black. It smelled like rusted iron and warm, wet leaves. She walked a wide path around it and went upstairs. From the loft window, the heath stretched in all directions, bleak, beautiful, and wrong. And in the middle of it now stood a figure. It wasn't moving, just standing, facing her cottage, motionless beneath the slowly aubergining sky. It was the same figure from the painting. She was sure of it, but it was closer now, too close. And as the light died in a slow, unnatural hush, the cottage let out a groan, a tired, old groan, and the floorboards in the main room shifted. The bell beneath them rang again, once, then twice, and then a knock, soft, from beneath. The knock came again, a third time, deliberate, dull, and heavy, like the swing of a padded hammer beneath the floorboards. Sienna didn't move. She stood at the top of the stairs, holding her breath as if exhaling might announce her presence to whatever was listening. The air in the cottage had gone dense, like a thick wool blanket draped over her shoulders. Every sound was muffled, including the ticking absence of time. No wind, no birds, just the hum of the kettle beginning to simmer on the stove. Another knock, not loud, but it pressed itself against her chest like a question she could not answer. She crept down the stairs. The center of the living room, where the warped circle would lay, had deepened somehow, like it had receded into the floor without ever being cut. The boards around it creaked softly as she approached, even though she hadn't yet stepped on them. Sienna crouched beside the circle. No holes, no hinges, just old, dark with the color of dried blood and ash. A whisper rose from beneath, so soft it was almost imagined. "Are you home?" She scrambled backward, knocking over the low stool beside the fireless hearth. It clattered once and rolled, wobbling before going still. The whisper came again, quieter this time, more hesitant. "It's been so long." She stared at the floor. Her skin crawled. The voice hadn't sounded threatening. It was mournful, lonely almost, like someone forgotten, trying to remember how to speak. But she didn't answer. She couldn't. Instead, she went into the kitchen, turned off the kettle, and stared at the window over the sink. Outside, the heath was empty again. The figure was gone. That night, the cottage groaned twice more. Just before midnight, she heard footsteps pacing the garden, soft, slow ones that never pass a gate. She stayed upstairs, curled in bed with the oil lamp burning at her side, and listened as the wind picked up for the first time since she'd arrived. It didn't howl. It murmured, like voices trying to speak through reeds and brambles, wind through rotted teeth. At 3 a.m., she heard the lullaby. It drifted up from the floorboards, soft and cracked, like an old record left to warp in the sun. Musical note, "Sleep now, child. The stars are slow. The doors are shut. The tide won't go. If someone knocks, Don't let them see. The sky is not meant for you or me. Musical note. She bit her lip until she tasted blood and pulled the covers over her ears. The singing stopped halfway through the second verse. Then silence. In the morning, something was waiting by the hearth. A package, brown paper tied with coarse twine. She hadn't seen it the night before. It hadn't been there when she checked the stove. On the front, in neat, faded script, for Miss Sienna Ray, Relmer Cottage, Underhill. She untied it with shaking hands. Inside, a photograph, black and white, old. It showed a group of people standing in front of the very cottage she now lived in. The faces were blurred, smudged as if by time, or unwillingness to be remembered. But in the center was a child, a little girl. Sienna froze, because the girl was wearing her necklace. The same silver chain with the little glass charm she had always worn since childhood. The one she had found in an antique box in her grandmother's attic. And behind the child, etched faintly into the clapboard siding of the cottage, was a circle, dark, perfectly symmetrical, the same one in the living room. A knock sounded at the door, not beneath, the front door this time. A louder knock, then silence, and then a voice. It's you again, isn't it? Always you. Every time. Sienna didn't answer the door. She pressed her back to the wall beside it, heart thundering in her chest, the photograph still clutched in her trembling hand. The voice had sounded familiar, not in a recognizable way. No name came to her lips, no face flashed in her memory, but familiar like a song she used to hum in the back seat of a long-forgotten car ride, like the taste of a dream. You never stay, the voice said, softer now. You always run. A pause. But not this time. It's thinner now. The hush is failing. She didn't breathe. The boards beneath her feet settled with a sigh, as though the house itself was listening. She waited. Eventually, footsteps crunched away through the gravel, then disappeared entirely, not fading into the distance, vanishing like a light switched off. 1 second there, the next gone. She opened the door a crack. No one, no prints in the soil, just a still, breathless heat, the air thick with mist and the scent of wild thyme. But something else had changed. The tree nearest the house, the one bent low over the well, had deep scratch marks along its trunk now, not random gouges. Words etched vertically down the bark. Remember what you buried. She closed the door, bolted it, and turned back toward the circle. That night, she dreamed for the first time in Relmer Cottage. She was standing in the center of the living room, barefoot, the floor beneath her glowing softly with a light that pulsed like a heart. The circle had become glass, and beneath it she saw water, black and still, but luminous somehow, lit from within by flickering shadows. Shapes moved beneath the surface. Faces, not drowning, not desperate, watching. One of them rose slowly from the dark, until its forehead pressed gently against the underside of the glass. Sienna took a step closer. The face was hers. Younger, 8, maybe 9. Wet hair clinging to her cheeks. Mouth slightly open in awe or horror. The child pressed one hand up against the glass. On her wrist was the same charm, the same silver necklace. Then the child whispered something, but no sound came. Sienna leaned closer, pressing both palms to glass, trying to read the girl's lips. Over and over, the same word. Down. Then the glass cracked. A single fracture, straight across the surface like a split seam in the throat. Sienna screamed and fell backward, and when she hit the floor, she was awake. The cottage was dark. The oil lamp had gone out. The windows were white with mist. She sat up slowly, hands shaking, sweat cooling on her neck. It had been a dream, just a dream, but the floor was wet beneath her. She touched it. Her fingers came back damp, streaked with fine black silt. And on the wall, near the staircase, a small muddy handprint, child-sized, familiar. By mid-morning, the fog had thickened, not mist anymore. This was a presence, clinging to the windows like breath on glass, turning daylight into a pale, smothered glow. The sun was nowhere, yet the shadows moved, swimming across the room as though lit from beneath rather than above. Sienna sat in the armchair by the cold fireplace, the photograph laid out on her knees, her fingers tracing the necklace on the blurred child's neck again and again. She had almost convinced herself it wasn't her. The face was too smudged. It could be anyone. But then she saw the back of the photograph. In pencil, faint and precise, someone had written, Autumn 1986, first return, 7th cycle. She will try again. No signature. No ink. Just soft pencil graphite. Aged by time. But the date stopped her. 1986. She hadn't even been born until the following spring. The hair on her arm stood up. She stood and walked slowly toward the hearth. Above it, the ancient mirror in its tarnished brass frame showed a warped reflection of a room. Her face stared back at her, wan, sleepless, lips cracked and eyes ringed with purple shadows. But beneath the surface, deep behind the glass, the shadows shivered, like a pulse, like someone else might be watching from the other side. She turned away. That evening, she heard the voice again, not from the door this time, from within the walls. As the light faded, she sat near the fireless hearth, not reading, not drinking tea, simply existing in the brittle hush of the house, when a sound like whispering pages began behind her. It was a gentle shuffling, like paper on paper, but thicker, more organic. She stood and approached the wall beside the mirror. The sound stopped. She pressed her ear to the paneling. Nothing. Then, just as she started to pull back, she never learned how to leave. Sienna froze. It was her voice, muffled, warped, but hers, coming from somewhere deep behind the wall, too far back for any hollow to explain. She backed away, palms slick with sweat. The air had gone cold. Her breath smoked. She turned in slow circles, watching the room for more movement, for another voice, a sound, anything. But the whisper didn't return. Instead, she noticed something new, near the floorboards behind the armchair. A seam, not obvious, hidden beneath a fraying rug she hadn't lifted before. When she pulled the rug back, there was a faint rectangular outline beneath, the edges barely wider than a child's shoulders. It was a door, or at least had once been. The handle had long since been removed, the wood around it smoothed over with age and dust. But it was there, waiting. Something whispered again from behind it. Not yet. That night, her dreams were worse. She dreamed of her grandmother's attic, the one she hadn't thought about in years. Boxes of old books, lace veils, broken dolls with clouded glass eyes, and in the center of the room, a large trunk sealed with a rusted chain. She approached it slowly, knew what was inside before she opened it. But when she finally broke the chain and raised the lid, it wasn't full of toys or blankets. It was full of mirror shards, each one catching a reflection of her face. Only it wasn't hers. Not fully. Too young, too pale, and the lips were moving, forming that word again and again. Down. She woke up to the sound of something scratching beneath the cottage again. 3 long strokes. Then silence. The oil lamp beside her was empty. The mirror across the room had fogged over, though the fire hadn't been lit. And just above the hearth, written in the soot with a child's hand, she's remembering too slowly. The next morning, Sienna didn't wait for the fog to lift. She dressed quickly, layering the thick wool cardigan she'd found in the wardrobe upstairs over yesterday's clothes. The cottage floorboards groaned beneath her feet as she moved, but nothing else stirred. No whispering, no child's laughter, no sound from the walls. But the soot-written message above the fireplace remained. She's remembering too slowly. She didn't wipe it away. Instead, she went straight for the hidden seam beneath the rug. The false panel had no handle, but Sienna ran her fingers along the frame until she found a shallow indentation, thumb-sized, worn smooth by years of touches, or attempts. She pushed. Nothing. Then, without meaning to, she whispered aloud, "I remember." A click. The panel opened inward, spilling a puff of stale, iron-scented air into the room. It was cold, unnaturally so, the chill slipping beneath her sleeves like tendrils of breath. She leaned closer and saw narrow steps descending into the dark. Wood, but warped and bowed with moisture. They vanished into blackness beneath the floor. She hesitated, then descended. The crawl space beneath the cottage was not a cellar. It was older, less structured, like something carved rather than built, dug out of necessity, not design. The walls were earthen, pressed soil holding the shape of rough brick where the foundation met the earth. She moved cautiously, oil lantern in hand, the weak flame fluttering like a heartbeat. There were shelves down there, not wooden ones, stone, rough, crumbling and impossibly old. She found jars on them, some empty, some with fragments of ribbon, bits of hair, a few teeth, baby teeth, each sealed in dusty paraffin. One jar held a melted candle, with a wick still blackened. Another, a single small shoe. Not a pair, just one. She kept walking. At the far end of the crawl space, a tattered lace curtain had been hung from a low beam. It moved gently in a breeze she couldn't feel. She parted it with slow fingers. Behind the curtain was a cradle, an antique wooden one, its frame blackened by age, small enough to fit a child no older than 2. Inside, a thick layer of dust obscured the outline of something curled within, a bundle wrapped in what looked like oilskin cloth, bound tightly with red twine. A name was carved into the headboard. The letters were faded, but still visible. Sienna, her hand flew to her mouth. Something in her chest recoiled, like a cord being plucked. But before she could react, before she could even draw a breath to scream, the bundle in the cradle twitched. Just once, then again, and a faint, wet sigh leaked from beneath the oilcloth. Sienna stumbled back, knocking her shoulder against the beam. The lantern flared wildly, casting her shadow across the dirt ceiling like a monster. But nothing emerged, nothing chased. She fled anyway, climbing the stairs with trembling knees, heart jackhammering. She slammed the panel shut behind her and dragged a heavy chair over it. She didn't leave the house. Something told her the forest wouldn't be safe. Not now. Not while that thing below waited. But she didn't sleep that night either. Instead, she sat by the hearth, knees drawn up, staring at the soot-written message until her vision blurred. At some point during the night, the mirror above the fireplace cleared. No breath, no condensation, just clarity, and within it, the reflection of the room. Except the reflection wasn't hers. In the mirror, a small girl stood at the base of the stairs. She wore a pale nightgown. Her hair was wet. She stared at Sienna with hollow, searching eyes, and around her neck hung the charm necklace. The girl opened her mouth. No sound, then pointed, down. Sienna did not speak for most of the day. Her voice had grown hoarse with disuse. But that wasn't why. Words had become fragile, too fragile. They felt like glass in her mouth. Something that might shatter and cut her from the inside out if she dared use them without care. The girl in the mirror hadn't returned, but her presence lingered, thick in the air like the scent of damp books and candle soot. Sienna kept her distance from the mirror and from the sealed crawl space, though her eyes drifted to both more than she liked. The house had shifted again. Not physically, not yet, but perceptibly. The air was wrong, quieter than before. Sound no longer behaved as it should. Her footsteps were dampened, her breathing unnaturally loud. When she knocked over a mug by accident, it shattered without a sound. By evening, she heard the music again. The same child's lullaby. Just a few brittle notes from a music box, warbling through the floorboards. But now it came from the walls, not below. From behind the panels in the sitting room. At first, she thought she was imagining it, but then a smell followed it. Plumwood and smoke. It was a smell she remembered. Her grandmother's attic again. The carved chest that had once held an old doll. Black eyes, stitched smile. The center with long soaked in fruit. Sealed with beeswax and left to decay. Sienna had opened the chest once, when she was 9, and found a photograph album she was never meant to see. She hadn't remembered that part until now. She moved toward the sitting room wall. There was no seam like beneath the rug, but something in her fingertips guided her. She placed her hand against the paneling beside the small bookshelf and knocked 3 times. Nothing. Then a hollow response. Not an echo, not natural. A knock in return. Sienna backed away. Then the wood shifted. The wall didn't open, but a single board buckled slightly, bending forward like breath pressing against thin cloth. The wallpaper split. Behind it, just for a moment, she saw a plaster etched with writing. Then it snapped back. The music stopped. Night came hard and fast. Sienna didn't light any lamps. She sat in darkness, her back to the sealed panel on the floor, eyes fixed on the mirror's reflection, watching for movement that didn't match the room. The house ticked softly around her, reflexing, windows bowing slightly under the weight of the fog, pressing inward. And sometime near midnight, she felt a change. It wasn't visible, but the air changed. Pressure shifted. Something had entered the room with her. She turned her head slowly. The door to the hallway was still closed. The mirror was still quiet. But beneath the floorboards came the sound of breathing. Not hers. Too shallow. Too fast. She strained to listen. And then a whisper. A child's voice, not the one she'd heard before. This one was raw, closer, more broken. You locked me down here. Sienna shook her head, whispered, I didn't. I don't. Yes, you did. You said it was safer. You said I had to be still. But it was cold. So cold. So long. The voice cracked. And now you left. You forgot. You left me. Sienna's chest tightened. Her mouth was dry. Who are you? No answer. Just a scratching sound. Then, thud, 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 from beneath the panel. The same pattern as before, but faster now. Urgent. Then again, closer to the wall. Then impossibly behind the mirror. Sienna turned and saw the reflection ripple. The little girl was back, standing where she had before. Her mouth was open wide this time. Too wide. Her arms hung limp. Her eyes had rolled upward, showing only white, and her feet didn't touch the ground. The reflection flickered like a film reel caught in a loop, grainy, unstable, shadow-bleached. Sienna couldn't move. The girl's white eyes stared through her, empty as if scoured clean. The mouth hung open in a wordless scream, and behind her, in the reflection's background, the cottage no longer looked the same. There were no curtains. The furniture was rotting, warped and split, and the fireplace, once red brick and homely, was now blackened to its bones. A cold pile of ash lay where warmth used to flicker, and just above it, etched into the soot again, were the words, "Don't leave again." Sienna blinked, and the mirror returned to normal. The girl was gone. The room behind her, clean, untouched, curtains drawn, hearth cold but unscorched. But something had shifted. Sienna rose slowly and moved the hallway, where a chill slid down her spine like silk dipped in water. The familiar path to the staircase greeted her, and the door to the unused guest room was ajar. That door had been closed all week. She moved toward it. Her hand hesitated at the knob, fingers trembling. The hinges groaned quietly as she pushed. The room beyond wasn't one she remembered. It was supposed to be the guest room. She'd slept there once. She remembered the brass-framed bed and the peeling wallpaper of wind-worn ivy. But now it was something else entirely. The bed was gone. The walls were concrete, not plaster. Wet, dripping faintly in the corners. A single fluorescent bulb buzzed above, flickering with a sickly blue light. The floor was stained. Rust or something worse. And in the far corner stood a small child's chair, facing the wall. Something was sitting in it, not moving. Sienna didn't breathe. The air here was heavy, like a blanket soaked in blood. Her vision wavered, depth and proportion losing their natural rules. The room felt tilted, but the ground was level. The edges blurred like a dream or a memory. She stepped inside. Each footfall echoed too loud, too long. She moved toward the corner and stopped just behind the chair. A low breath shuddered from its occupant. She leaned in. A child sat there, but its back was wrong. The proportions were off, elongated, too narrow at the top, too wide at the base. It didn't turn. It didn't react. But in its lap was something wrapped in cloth. Sienna reached for it slowly. The child didn't move. Her fingers brushed the fabric. It felt like oilskin again. Familiar. She pulled gently, and as the cloth parted, She saw what was inside. A mirror, small, handheld, the back etched with the same spiral pattern she'd seen beneath the cradle. Dust coated the glass, but not enough to hide the reflection. In it, she saw herself, but not now, not in this moment. A younger Sienna, maybe 7, her hair in braids, wearing a red jumper, standing at the edge of a well, looking down, and in her tiny hand, the same charm necklace. She wasn't crying. She was smiling. The lights in the room exploded. Glass rained down. Sienna staggered back as the chair toppled. Empty now, the cloth bundle gone. The walls pulsed, and the stain on the floor began to spread, oozing outward in jagged veins. She fled, back into the hallway, slamming the door shut behind her. But even before she could bolt it, the door began to fade. The wood became transparent, then mist, then gone. Just a blank wall now, as if the room never existed. But in her hands, she still held the mirror, and on its surface, her reflection remained. Still a child, still smiling, still at the well. That night, Sienna did not sleep. She sat in the middle of the living room with every lamp turned off, the oilskin-wrapped mirror pressed against her chest like a wounded pet. The fire in the hearth, once cheerful, refused to light. Every match she struck died hissing. The fog beyond the windows had thickened into a slate-gray wall. She had stopped marking the days. Time in the cottage now moved in loops, not lines. The mirror no longer showed her present face. It only replayed that image. The girl herself, standing at the well, holding the necklace, the same expression of innocent delight across her small face. Sienna whispered to it, asked what it meant. No reply, but in the silence, she began to remember, not as memories, but as feelings, textures, sensations of touch and temperature. The wind at her back on that long-forgotten day, the damp stone of the well's rim, the chill that had crept up from its depth, like something buried trying to breathe upward through the dirt. She had dropped something that day, not by accident, deliberately, into the dark. The well, it had been behind the cottage once. Decades ago, she remembered now, her grandmother had forbidden her from going near it. It had been sealed with a rusting iron grate and stone cemented tight, covered in ivy and soil, half buried by overgrowth. But she'd gone anyway, and she'd whispered a wish into it, a childish, secret thing, something selfish, the kind of wish a 7-year-old makes without understanding its weight. She didn't remember the exact words, but the feeling of it was still inside her, and whatever she'd wished for had been answered. Now, the air in the cottage shifted once more, a low groan, like a door opening in the basement of the world. And for the first time in days, the fog lifted, not fully, just a thin corridor of visibility beyond the front door. And through it, in the moonless dark, she could see the outline of something she hadn't noticed before. A clearing at the far edge of the woods, where no path had ever been, where no path should have led. She wrapped a mirror in her coat and stepped outside. The night air clung to her skin, viscous and cold. Leaves whispered without wind. The cottage loomed behind her like a forgotten mausoleum. As she moved through the trees, the sound changed. No longer silence. Now it was a murmur, low voices, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, speaking at once, layered like fog itself. Some words were clear. Her name, spoken slowly, syllable by syllable. Others were in a language she did not know, but somehow understood. The clearing opened up before her. Flat earth, no grass, just soil, dry and cracked like a drained riverbed. And in its center, the well, old, familiar, and wrong. No grate this time. Its mouth gaped wide, rimmed with wet stone, and a bitter cold poured from its throat. A rope hung down into the darkness, frayed and motionless. And around the well, laid in a perfect circle, were mirrors, all kinds, pocket-sized and standing, broken and whole, each angled slightly toward the well, as if watching it. She approached. The murmuring grew louder. The mirrors did not reflect her. They reflected her younger self, the girl in the jumper, over and over, a ring of red-clad children, smiling solemnly, gazing into the mouth of the well. Sienna's knees trembled. She knelt beside the stone rim and peered down. Darkness, impossibly deep, but not empty. Far below, something was moving, like fabric in water, like hair in slow motion. And then an eye, it blinked, not human, not animal. It looked up and recognized her. And in that moment, Sienna remembered her wish. Not the words, but the intention. She had wished, all those years ago, for something terrible. She had wished to never be alone again. The eye in the well did not blink again. It simply watched. A stillness more oppressive than movement, as though time itself was waiting, crouched just beyond reach. Sienna leaned back from the stone rim, her breath fogging in the air, though there was no warmth in her lungs. The circle of mirrors surrounding her shimmered faintly, and then one, just one, cracked, not from a strike or pressure, but as if something inside it had moved too suddenly, splitting the glass from within. A spidery fracture etched across its surface, and within that crack, her reflection twisted. The child in red was no longer smiling. It stared, face blank, eyes wide. Behind her, in the reflection's background, shadows gathered, not around the well, but inside the cottage. Sienna turned. The fog that parted to let her through had begun to move again, curling inward, slow and quiet. It thickened along the path behind her, swallowing trees, extinguishing starlight. It was herding her. Back home. She stood, slowly, carefully, and walked to the edge of clearing. When her feet touched the earth beyond the circle of mirrors, a low hum echoed beneath the soles of her shoes. A resonance, not sound. The fog opened just enough to form a narrow trail. She followed. The cottage was waiting. Windows black, door ajar, the interior lightless but not dark, lit instead by something deeper, duller, a red glow like hot coals left too long, the kind of light that felt permanent, scarring. She entered. The floor was warm, not electrically, not naturally, organically, as if the very bones of the house pulsed. The door shut softly behind her, sealing with no touch. She walked into the living room and stopped. The furniture was rearranged. Everything formed a circle like a ritual. Every chair turned inward. In the center sat a single, rectangular table covered in dust and old lace. On it lay the oilskin cloth, unwrapped, and on the cloth, a journal, her grandmother's, bound in faded leather, edges fraying like dried petals. The cover bore no title, only a stitched spiral, same as a mirror, the charm, the stones beneath the cradle. Sienna opened it. The writing inside was not in her grandmother's hand, not the spidery cursive she remembered from birthday cards or letters. This handwriting was perfect, consistent, measured, a line repeated over and over, filling page after page. She asked to never be alone, so we came. Flip, she asked to never be alone, so we came. Flip, 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 thousands of them, until the final page. There, the writing changed. New ink, fresher, sharper, carved in thick strokes. Now you asked to. Her breath caught. Behind her, a chair creaked. She turned, heart hammering. No one sat in it, but the cushions were depressed. Something had. She stepped back, and another chair shifted, and another, until every chair in the circle creaked one by one, like an audience rising from invisible seats. The air thickened, buzzing, faint with that same impossible murmur. Then, from a hallway, came a soft knock. Not at the door, at the wall. Sienna moved toward it slowly, and watched as the plaster dissolved, peeled away like wet paper, revealing a door, old, worm-eaten, locked with an iron bolt, and bound in rope. The knot hung loose, frayed. Waiting, she reached out, pulled. The rope gave easily, dropping like a shed skin. The bolt groaned. The door opened inward, and behind it, steps, descending into darkness, but not basement darkness, not wood or stone. Earth, uneven, packed soil dug by hand. The smell of wet roots and decay. and from deep below came a voice, gentle, sweet. You don't have to be afraid anymore. It was her voice, but younger. The stairs groaned like old bones beneath her weight. Soft earth giving just enough to make each step feel uncertain. The deeper Sienna went, the warmer the air became. Not the warmth of comfort, but a smothering closeness, like breath trapped too long beneath a blanket. The lantern she carried, an old oil lamp found hanging just inside the revealed door, flickered uneasily, its light drawing frantic shadows that danced across the narrow tunnel walls. The descent seemed endless. Worm-eaten roots curled from the ceiling like skeletal fingers. The air tasted metallic, damp, and something else, sweet, almost rotten. She passed old wooden crossbeams, their nails rusted and bent. Support beams that looked ready to collapse under the weight of unseen years. There were no spiders, no insects, no movement, only the soft, muffled sound of breathing. Not hers. Below, ahead, waiting. She couldn't tell how far down she'd come. It might have been minutes, or hours. Time was useless here. Her footsteps had long stopped echoing. The world had become close, like being inside a ribcage. And then the tunnel ended, not with a wall, but a room, wide, circular, dug from soil but shaped with care. Tools had scraped this earth into symmetry. The floor was patterned with lines. No, scratches drawn in spirals and broken circles, chaotic until viewed from the center. Then, and only then, did they form something whole. In the middle sat a stone crib. No mattress, no linens, only ashes. Sienna's heart pounded so hard she felt it behind her eyes. She stepped forward, the ground soft and warm beneath her, and looked into the crib. The ash shifted faintly in the lamplight, revealing a charred, twisted spine. No ribs, just a single childlike vertebral column. Tiny, fragile. She gagged. Then the air changed. From a far wall, something peeled open, flesh, not stone. The earth moved like skin, parting as if to birth something. A gap formed, revealing a second chamber. From within came the smell of milk and mold. She entered. It was a nursery, rock-shaped like cribs. Bone mobiles hung from tangled roots. Dolls made of fabric and human hair, all arranged in a half-circle. In the middle sat a low, wooden chair, and on it a figure, hunched, cloaked in pale linen, stitched to the floor by long threads of sinew. It turned its head slowly toward her. There was no face, only a black hole where a face should be, and within it, the void shimmered, not with light but with reflections. Sienna saw herself, hundreds of times, a child at the well, a teenager in the forest, an infant being handed into a woman's arms, a woman that looked like her grandmother, but younger, too young. The voice came again. She promised we'd never be alone. She said we'd be safe in the ground. But you left. You forgot. You came back. Sienna dropped the lamp. Darkness swallowed the room, but the void face still shone. It leaned forward, arms unraveling from the chair, impossibly long. The sinew tore with a sickening wet rip. Now we remember. Now we begin again. Sienna screamed as the room collapsed inward, not crumbling, but folding, curling like burnt paper, drawing her toward the center of the spiral, back toward the crib, back toward the ashes, back toward home. She awoke beneath the crib, not beside it, not in the nursery, but beneath. The soil above her glowed faintly, thin and blue like moonlight bleeding through milk. Roots wove in dense webs across the ceiling of the tunnel. She now found herself in, dripping a slow, cold fluid. The space was narrow, too narrow. Her arms pressed tightly to her sides, her legs cramped and twisted, body shaped into the narrow confines of a burrow. She couldn't tell how she had moved. Had she crawled? Had she been pulled? The air here was older. It wasn't just damp, it was thick with memory. Voices moved like water around her, whispering through the earth, whispering into her. She blinked and the tunnel changed. The walls became soft. The scent of milk again, sour and metallic. She reached out, and her fingers touched the wall. It pulsed. The tunnel was no tunnel. It was a throat. Something had swallowed her. She did not scream. She did not struggle. She only wept for herself, for the girl she had been, for the ash in the crib. And as she lay still within the living earth, the memories came. Not hers, the house's. The cottage was never a place. It had been born. Just like her, it had once been a woman, long before it became walls and beams and roofs. A woman who asked never to be alone. So she built her home from the things that listened. The woods, the wind, the things underneath. She fed it warmth and sorrow, and in return, it gave her children, or echoes of children. Things with small hands and quiet teeth. Things that could fill the rooms with sound and breath and movement. And in her joy, she asked for more. So it took, from outside, from other places, from other wombs. The woman died. The house did not. It remembered her longing and fed. The tunnel exhaled. Sienna felt her body push forward, up through the tight passage, dragged like a bird through soil. She clawed at the damp sides until her fingers bled, roots slicing into her skin. Her breath came in short, sharp sobs, and then she broke through into a room she knew, the attic, but it was wrong. Stretched, unfolded, no angles, only curves and breath and a faint sound. Wet, rhythmic, the house was breathing. The window was gone, replaced by a massive circular mirror. No frame, no backing, just glass hanging in the air. It reflected nothing. Not her, not the attic, only darkness. In the center of the room stood the rocking chair, and in it, grandmother, her face pale, too still, lips stitched into a thin smile with red thread. Her hands rested on her lap, folded over a bundle wrapped in a familiar oilskin cloth. It moved, once, a small, twitching kick. Sienna stepped forward, arms trembling, and reached for the bundle. But her grandmother's eyes snapped open. Empty, not blank, not blind. Empty, as though someone had scooped her soul out, leaving only the shell. "Did you bring it?" she asked, voice like broken twigs. Sienna did not answer. The bundle mewed. Her grandmother smiled wider. The thread pulled tight. Her lips split at the corners, bleeding. "You remembered. You came home." The mirror in the attic shimmered, not reflecting the room but absorbing it. Light bent toward it. Dust, breath, the weak glow from beneath the floorboards, all draining into that blank, perfect surface. It pulsed slowly, as if syncing with Sienna's breath, or perhaps her heartbeat, or something older, something beneath both. Grandmother had not moved. Only the corners of her smile had deepened, now almost reaching her ears, the blood trailing in neat lines down her chin. Soaking into the bundle she cradled. The mewling from the oilskin had grown sharper. No longer the sound of an infant, no longer pitiful. It had become inquisitive, alert, hungry. Sienna's knees locked. She took a half step back, but the floor beneath her bare feet stretched, softened, like warm taffy, drawing her forward. She stumbled, caught herself, and her hand landed on the rocking chair's arm. It was not wood. It was bone. Sienna jerked back. The chair didn't rock. It breathed. Just once. Her grandmother's mouth opened as a bloody thread unraveled, each pull emitting a wet, sucking sound. When the lips came free, the wound gaped wider than any mouth should, rows of small, square teeth lining the inside like a second smile behind first. It needs a name. Sienna shook her head. "No, you gave it one before," grandmother rasped. "You chose it. You knew what you were doing." The bundle twitched again. The cloth peeled itself back, folding like petals. Inside wasn't a baby, nor a creature. It was a mirror, not like the one on the wall. This one was small, the size of a dinner plate, and slick with amniotic fluid. Its surface was cloudy, shifting. Sienna leaned in before she could stop herself. She saw her own face, but not her. Younger, maybe 10, standing at the garden edge, holding a paper lantern with a candle inside. Beside her stood a figure in a shawl. It wasn't her grandmother. It was herself again, older, the age she was now, watching the child Sienna with a patient expression. Then the child turned and said, "Why didn't you come sooner?" The mirror darkened. The surface cracked. Grandmother's hand moved toward Sienna, curling, grasping, but not to hold. It sought her shadow, and it found it. Sienna gasped as a pull gripped her spine, as though someone had snagged a hook just behind her heart and was reeling her backward. But only the part of her that remembered. Faces, days, voices, gone. Like someone was unthreading her memory. One name remained. Her own. Sienna. But even that wavered. In desperation, she looked at the larger mirror across the attic. It had grown, now half the size of the wall. Its center bulged outward slightly, pressing into the room like a soap bubble ready to burst. She screamed, "Let me go." "You came back," Grandmother whispered. "You were always going to come back. They remember you." The bundle in her lap laughed. A thin, wet sound. The room tilted. The mirror split, and a hand reached out. The hand emerging from the mirror was not flesh. It shimmered with something like skin, but it lacked detail. No nails, no creases, no knuckles. Smooth and unfinished, like a thought half-born. It beckoned. Behind it, the mirror's interior rippled with seams. A spinning top on a dirt floor. A girl crouched in the rain, whispering to a cracked jar. A willow tree with hands instead of leaves, swaying in windless air. The sky above them all had turned the color of wet aubergine, streaked with glistening filaments like nerves. Sienna could no longer distinguish between what she was seeing and remembering. The attic groaned as though it breathed through wood. Her body felt suspended between gravity and dream, as if sleep had found her but decided not to close her eyes. Her name was fading, each syllable smudging further away in her mind. Seen, the voice, her grandmother's or the house's, or her own, crooned behind her, low and soothing. "Go on. You were always meant for elsewhere. You left your echo in the wrong world." The chair rocked once, twice, empty. She hadn't seen her grandmother vanish. Had she ever been there? The mirror hand curled, fingers opening slightly. Something lay in the palm, a small, dark seed. No, an eye. It blinked. Sienna felt her breath catch in her throat. She could not move, not because she was frozen in fear, but because some ancient obedience had begun to root itself inside her. "It's a gift," the voice murmured. "It sees what you try to forget." The attic twisted inward like a closing blossom. Walls bowed. The ceiling exhaled light. The floorboard below her bloomed into furrows of soil, like the plowed rows of a waiting field. Sienna stepped forward, one foot bare, one hand reaching. Not for the hand, not for the eye, but for the mirror itself. And as her fingers touched it, the glass turned soft. It swallowed her arm gently, up to the elbow, then shoulder, then chest. There was no cold, no pain, only waking. She opened her eyes to night, not darkness. A vast and patient night. Endless hills surrounded her, stitched with lines of rusted fence. Lanterns hung in the sky, not stars, each with a tiny flame swaying against invisible winds. Below her, the ground breathed in soft rhythms. She was barefoot. The house no longer loomed behind her. In its place stood a tree, wide and low, its bark blackened with soot, its roots trailing in all directions like spindly fingers. And from the tree hung dozens of small bundled shapes in oilskin cloth. Each one gently rocked in still air. Each one knew. A woman approached from the distance. Sienna knew her walk. She had seen it in dreams. It was hers. Herself aged. Not just older, but changed. Thinner, quieter. Eyes glowing faintly with the same aubergine hue that bled from the sky. The woman smiled at her, not with joy, but recognition. "You're back. We needed another to carry the hush. Now you remember what silence costs." Sienna tried to speak, but her tongue had become something else. A ribbon of woven shadow. She did not need to speak. She understood. The lanterns above flickered once. The tree sighed, and somewhere in the farthest field, a door opened. No hinges, no frame, just a door standing by itself. She walked toward it, and as she did, the earth whispered with every step. "You were always here. You only had to return. We never forget what was given." We never forget what was taken. She reached the door, turned the handle, and stepped into a room filled with cribs, each holding a bundle, each bundle gently mewling. She took her place beside them. The aubergine sky outside hung with endless twilight, and the house remembered her.